I'm joined today by Robert Mensell, Managing Director of Estrella Resources. Robert, thanks for your time.
Morning, David.
You've recently taken on the role of Managing Director at Estrella Resources, with the company focused on building a first mover position in Timor-Leste across manganese, limestone, and broader exploration opportunities. Today, I want to unpack why you've joined, what makes Timor-Leste opportunity so compelling, and what investors should be watching over the coming months. So let's start from the top. Why Estrella and why now?
Okay. So maybe before we even talk about that, let's just talk about the broader functions that are happening in the economy at the moment. And I think you kind of really got to talk about Indonesia. Okay. So I was just reading another article recently, and it's common and it's quite true that as the world gets wealthier, as the world demands more commodities, there's a couple of regions in the world that are really going to dominate, and it's obviously copper, for example, in South America, but in Asia it's going to be Indonesia. Okay, so Indonesia is going to be copper, it's going to be coal, it's going to be nickel, gold, etc. And really, Timor sits in the middle of Indonesia. We are basically encapsulated by Indonesia. So no matter what, it's a good place to look because it's going to be one of the key players. Well, it is now already, and it will be for a long, long time. So it's a really good region to be in. And I
And you've,
guess now, sorry,
sorry, go on.
yeah, the reason now is really probably for the first time since since independence that you can actually come in here and get certainty. And of course, you require certainty, to get the capital. And in 2023, 2022, the government put through the new mining code. It's pretty good. It's very similar in many respects to what you see in WA. So that's provided the confidence for people to come in, and the confidence like companies like Australia come in as well.
Now, you've described Timor-Leste as one of the world's last underexplored frontiers. What does that mean for investors looking for opportunity?
Yeah, okay. So, I go back to my comments about Indonesia again. Indonesia is one of the most mineral-rich regions of the world, for good reason. It sits on the Banda Arc, a lot of volcanics here. And Timor is part of that. And unlike the rest of Indonesia, Timor isn't that well populated and certainly hasn't had modern exploration here since what would be really the 1930s. So it was the last time there was any significant exploration occurring here. So, I'm not a geologist, but it's a pretty exciting place, for geology to come and have a look. There aren't too many places, certainly aren't places like this in Indonesia, where you can walk in and know that no one's been looking here for the last 80 years. So pretty exciting.
Now, I want to just talk about manganese. You've set a target of
Hmm.
discovering a JORC-compliant manganese resource of more than 2 million tonnes. Why
Yeah.
is that metric so important?
A 2 million ton plus resource, would give us a reserve, probably at least 1.5 million ton reserve, which means that we can set up for the long term. That's, for the next 5 years, let's say 200 to 300,000 tons per annum. That's a really good production rate to be in. It's a good production rate, to support the infrastructure that's required for it. So, maybe a washing plant in the future is a good infrastructure to support, either transshipping and barging, etc., or a port. So you need the kind of tons per annum to justify that capital. And you need the mine life of about 5 years. And the reason why you need that is because you need time to get into the market. You need time to prove yourself with your customers. You need time to demonstrate your quality, and you need to be seen as a relatively long-term supplier to these customers. And if you can do all that, well, you can actually get the benchmark price or even better. And if you are, the alternative is just doing lots of little ones, yep, you might make some money, but you won't get the price, the higher price, because you're effectively an ad hoc supplier or an unknown supplier. So we really do want to set up a long-term business here, manganese business. And of course, a 5-year mine life gives you time to go and do further exploration to build your resource base and convert it to reserves in a timely fashion.
You've recently completed an MTD survey at Erimeri, the Manganese project, with an IP
Yeah.
survey expected in July and broader regional EM work planned. In sort of simple terms, what are those surveys and why are they so important to building out
Yeah.
the understanding of what you've got?
So firstly, the MTD work that's being done over Erimeri, that's a bit of a test case for us. It's relatively new technology, certainly new technology being drone mounted, but it's enabled us to do 50-meter line spacing. So that's given us some really good resolution. We are expecting to see those results in the next 2 to 3 weeks, and we're very excited to see how it sits. We did some initial IP work last year, so we know, and even from our recent mining, we know that where some manganese already sits within the pit. We're very keen to see how well the MTD data sits over that. Once we actually get the MTD data, and we've highlighted some areas, we can do some IP work. IP work is very cheap in comparison, and it's something we can do even at a closer resolution and really identify some good drill targets. So really the idea is to have at least 2 layers of geophysics to help you really zone in on those areas we want to have a look at. Beyond that, I don't think you mentioned that, is that we are keen to do a regional EM survey. That might even be an MTD type survey, but there'll be a helicopter base. And really, we're looking for the big deposits. We're looking for continuity, long lengths. We've already got 4 good prospects. Erimeri is only one of those. And what we really want to do is make sure that we see what's over the hill. Because at the moment, we've literally just walked up and, here's some manganese, and it's been very successful. But hey, what's further over the hill? What's at the back? We don't really know. It is vegetated, particularly in the wet season. It's hard to see what's on the ground. And EM, even at a maybe 300-meter spacing, will give us a first pass into what we've got behind us.
And the company has also completed an expression of interest process for the initial 27,000 tonne manganese trial parcel.
Yeah,
What
yeah,
should
that's right.
investors get from that? Is the trial parcel mainly about near-term revenue, customer validation, product quality, logistics, all of the above?
Well, I can tell you, in an ideal world, it's all those latter things, which is is product acceptance, it's building the market base, it's maintaining customer interest, etc. I think in an ideal world, we'd like to give each customer 5,000 or 6,000 tons, to give them a bit of a taste of our product, and to enable them to continue to support us and follow what we're doing. I think we'll see what will happen. I can tell you that when we went out, we had 20 parties who sought a expressions of interest data pack or document, which included all our assay results, etc. We received 9 back that who actually do want to buy our product. Now, for us, we just have to make some decisions on how we want to do that. We are mindful of the fact that in an ideal world, we'd like to give it to 5 or 6 customers. To maintain their interest, but we are mindful of logistics costs, shipping costs, etc., and how the best to do that. So we'll make a recommendation shortly to the board on how we think they should go. But really, it is trying to develop as many contacts with customers, both traders but also end users, because long term, that's what will give us the greatest value for our product.
And limestone is another part of
Yeah.
the Timor-Leste story. Australia has a limestone resource base of more than 600 million tonnes, a large number. What needs to happen to turn that resource into a development and revenue opportunity?
Yeah, so our limestone business is almost the complete opposite to our manganese business. Our manganese business is relatively low tons, but high value and high margin. The limestone business is very much a bulk commodity, and there's a couple of components there that you'll see. So, firstly, maybe even outside of the resource that's been published, we do have some other areas that are very, very high grade limestone, and we're talking about plus 95% calcium carbonate. So we've got people wanting to talk to us about that already. So we're certainly keen to develop that resource, because that in itself could be a separate business. So, we're talking about chemical grade limestone, we're talking about feedstock here for maybe lime or quick lime or something like that in the future, or caustic soda or whatever. So we're certainly, we certainly see that opportunity there. The second part of the business is really about making sure we've got a cornerstone customer. And so, we've been in discussions now with our Indonesian partners there. I'm traveling again next month, spend time with those customers. It's important that we get this cornerstone customer in place, and then we build a customer base around them. So it's really, it's a significant marketing effort required now for the next few months to really form let's say a consortium of customers. And that will then actually support, the capital cost that's required for actually building the infrastructure. And then the third thing, of course, is we still need to progress our design work for the infrastructure. So, we've got a port location, we've got some initial bathymetry work, but now it's getting down to the gritty end, where we need to go and do some geotech drilling, both out on the reef, but also on shore, to just make sure that that the ground's competent enough to build what we want to build there. And if it's not, well, we might mean shuffling up and down the coast a little bit, but it's a pretty good location. But I got to say, when I first joined Estrella, what amazed me is, I went up to Wirramata there, and we only drilled a tiny fraction of the resource, and already over 500 million tons. But you can look down the coast for probably a good 30 kilometers, and there's limestone, high-grade limestone, immediately adjacent to the coast. It is the most obvious place in the world to have a limestone industry. It's it's on the north side of the island. It literally faces out some of the customers. You can almost see them from there. It's immediately on shore, and it's deep water. It's just a question of what stepping stones you use to go forward to actually build that. And a lot of it revolves around the initial startup and how quickly you go. Because once you get to scale, it's extremely profitable.
Now, you've used the phrase disciplined execution.
Yeah.
And you've said that Estrella will be ruthless in its focus on value. What does that mean in practice?
Okay, so we've got we're a small company. We've limited resources, both financially and technically, and even just in manning, etc., and in time, of course, as well. And so what we really do need to do is position ourselves, in the right part of the market. And so if you talk about the manganese, what gets us in discussions with people and gets everyone interested is the grade. I mean, the grade is exceptional. So I recently came back from a conference in Brazil. I spoke to probably about 20 different potential customers. It's the grade. It's the grade. So I think that's something that we can be competitive on, because we have an exceptional grade. We may not have the big tonnages that some of the other operations have, but we have the grade, and we also have the location. And by that I mean, not only are we, close to end customers, we're effectively in the midpoint between India, Indonesia, and North Asia, and we're not in Africa. So certainly, customers do want to diversify their customer base or their supply base, and so we're very attractive. So I think that's true for the manganese. And then I think finally, for the limestone, it's really back to those other comments that I made. We have a massive deposit immediately adjacent to Asia or within Asia, and that's a real strategic advantage. So that makes sense. It's not like you're talking about somewhere in Australia where the shipping into Asia itself will kill you, from a project point of view. So that certainly makes sense. And you would see, we do have, we are actively exploring for other minerals, copper and gold. And I think, for a company like us, one of the, people don't want to hear this, but one of the things you see with small companies is often they make the wrong decision because they don't have any choices. And I think it's for us, we want to always make sure we've got choices in front of us, in everything we're doing, so we can always make the optimal decision. It's very hard to make the optimal decision when you only have one thing to do, one choice ahead of you. If we're constantly saying, okay, well, these are the other opportunities, for our limited capital and unlimited resources, and these are likely to give us the best internal rate of returns and NPV values, you can be assured that we're actually making the right choice. If you don't create opportunities, if you don't create choices, you will be steered, into a non-optimal path. And I think you often see that, with small companies where they don't abandon ideas or whatever because they have nothing else there. There's no plan, no plan B, C, or D, or whatever. And you don't have real competition for capital as well. And ultimately, then the optimal decision doesn't happen. Does that make sense?
It does. It does.
Yeah.
And I suppose from an investor point of view, what should they be looking at from the company over the next 3 to 6 months as those catalysts to drive that value?
Yeah. So, time is everything, and, Timor, like other parts of the world, can be frustrating, but compared to Australia, it's incredibly quick. Projects in Australia now, the timeframes are 5 years plus before they develop. We did a trial pit in 9 months or something, because it was quite remarkable. So I think what you'll see for us is, let's say a disciplined approach. So obviously, we've got the manganese now, so we'll sell that. But that's not really our immediate focus. We'll do that for more from a sales and marketing point of view. But we must find this 2 million tonne plus resource, and that means the MTD data for Irimiri, the IP work. It means going out and doing that regional EM work to find those big targets. And then and if we don't find those big targets, well, that's fine too. We'll then decide what we want to do. Do we go look elsewhere, or do we look for the smaller targets? But knowing that it's a different business plan, knowing that it's pretty different economics. It's about creating opportunities again.
So this business, I should have probably asked at the top, this business is essentially a exploration business, a development business, potentially logistics business. You've had a lot of experience in this area, and it would be remiss of me not to ask you to share that experience, because that's what's going to give comfort to the investors on why this project and projects, can be taken forward.
Okay. Well, this business is a money-making business, okay? So let's not forget that. We're here to make money. We're not a charity. And we're here to make a return for shareholders. Now, how can we do that? And how do we do that? Well, firstly, if you talk about our exploration here, so, we must be very efficient on the way we spend our shareholders' money. So, and we must be quick. And so that means, approaching our exploration in a logical fashion, having an idea of what the minimum targets are that we want to actually have success, or to actually give us the success that we're looking for, and implementing well. And to do that, it means everything from having the right community relations on the ground, the right relationship with the government. That's not necessarily always agreeing with the government or doing what the government or just rolling over what the government says, but basically being a legitimate explorer. It means having the right people on the ground. It means implementing well. It means being conscious of time and being efficient, with our limited resources. So that's really, how we'll generate wealth for our shareholders. And if we find something, they'll get wealth from that. If we produce something, they will get, income and effectively, a dividend stream in the long term. So we're certainly trying to increase the shareholder wealth. Yep.
And your experience in delivering projects of this scale in other settings?
Yeah. So, I mentioned earlier on that, it's almost like we've got two businesses. The manganese business at the moment, relatively high value. Logistics aren't a big part of it. You can withstand relatively high logistics costs, be it transshipping, etc. The limestone is a totally different business. It's really a sales and marketing business. It's really a logistics business. The mining is the least of our concerns, so to speak. And so what does that mean? It means, making sure you've got a good customer base, make sure you've got several customers, making sure you've got a good financial package in place that's robust. We're not seeing, any real technical issues with regards to the operation. It's very, very simple. It's hard to get simpler. But it's all around sales and marketing and logistics. And then the other thing, of course, is, once we've got our geotech work done for the port, is making sure that we really do have a foot on a port that can be used for not just limestone but other commodities in the future. That in itself is quite a significant asset.
Well, for investors, the key takeaways are Estrella's first mover position in Timor-Leste, the manganese resource target, progress on the trial parcel, and the pathway to unlock value from the limestone assets. We look forward to watching the next phase unfold. Robert, thanks for your time.
Thanks, David. I've enjoyed it.